Welcome to At Issue. I'm H. Wayne Wilson. Thank you so much for joining us. For the next half hour, we're going to be talking about a vision, a long-term vision for the two large communities in McLean County. The mayors of Bloomington and Normal are joining us to look at the future and what McLean County, and in particular Normal and Bloomington, might look like. And to have that conversation, of course, is the mayor of Normal. Chris Koos has been the mayor in your third term now.
Third term.
Thank you for being with us.
Glad to be here.
And then the junior partner is Terry Renner in his first term. As a matter of fact, it was a year ago yesterday that you were elected and you were re-elected.
That's correct.
And you celebrated by shaking hands?
Well, actually, we always shake hands.
That's right.
We always talk. So we're trying to improve the collaboration because we know that we may be two cities, but we're definitely one community, and we want to try to strengthen those ties and rebuild the trust that's been lost in many recent years.
Well, and there's a lot of things I want to talk about, but let's talk about that cooperation in terms of Bloomington and Normal for a long time have been known as communities that have a lot of intergovernmental agreements. There's a lot of sharing, if I may use that term. Are you looking more at that in the future?
I think we both agree that looking for those opportunities to cooperate through intergovernmental agreements, be it equipment usage, fire stations, mutual aid agreements that we have back and forth. I think there's savings for both communities if you can do that successfully.
Without using the word merge?
Without the M word.
Okay. Sorry, I had to say it, didn't I? Is that, you share that sentiment?
Absolutely. I mean, Chris and I aren't just on the same page, we're on the same letter when it comes to that. So we talk all the time, and so we know what each other are doing, we know what our concerns are for both communities, and so I think that's part of it, is that we keep the lines of communication open, and we have lunch regularly, we meet regularly. Usually it's me calling Chris as the junior mayor to try to get his advice, cry on his shoulder, say, what should I do at this point? So absolutely, we're working together, and I continue to look forward to that. And if frankly it wasn't for Chris, I don't know what I would do on some days.
Back to the senior partner, if I may use the term.
Sure.
You mentioned Firehouse. Are the two of you looking at a shared Firehouse?
I think we're having the conversation is a better way to talk about it. A lot of that work's going to be determined by if one firehouse can serve the east side of our community, both communities. There's just a lot of issues, but Terry and I are willing to have the conversation and push the conversation to our staffs to see if that's a viable option.
Absolutely, I would agree, and of course push the conversation to our councils that have to get used to working together more on common issues. And certainly for us, the fire situation is even more severe because the national goal is 6 minutes, answering 90% of your call in 6 minutes. We're at 9 minutes, and that's just unacceptable as we move forward.
I want to continue the conversation about long-term, but I have one immediate issue that I do want to address with you, and that is a problem with U.S. Cellular parking deck. We're talking north of $1 million in repairs.
Absolutely. Actually, by the time we're done with other kinds of soft costs, it could be very well closer to $2 million to fix that. And it's only about 7 years old. I mean, this is frankly, it's preposterous and inexcusable. And we're doing everything we can within the legal means and the contract to make sure that our citizens are made whole. The difficulty is this contract is not one we would engage in today, but it prevents us from going directly to court. So we have to go through a mediation and arbitration process. And there are subcontractors. It is really a mess. And I can't actually talk more about the legal strategy of it at this point yet, because it might very well harm our case.
So there might be public dollars spent?
If we can't recover everything, I mean, we're going to try to do everything possible to recover. Our attorneys have told us that we've got obviously an excellent case, but you don't necessarily know what a mediator or arbitrator will award. They may not award us the soft costs and some of the money that we have spent in staff time. So it may wind up costing us a few $100,000. Again, we don't know up front.
And in conclusion, real briefly, what's wrong with the parking deck?
Well, there are several things, and I'm not an engineer, but basically they were precast structures, and the metal coils that go through it are too small. And until we X-rayed them after the fact, just a few months ago, we didn't know that. There would have been no way to determine when they came in that they weren't done according to specifications and the contract.
Let's turn to transportation. Normal tends to be out front when it comes to transportation. Yes, you sit at the corner of 3 interstates, and yes, you have a rail line that goes through there. But we've got motor fuel tax that is dropping. People are driving less. Miles per gallon are much higher than they used to be. So as a result, fewer dollars are coming into the till. And of course, the state distributes that to the various communities. And are you concerned, because there is a projection that the highway account may run dry this year?
It's actually very likely to run dry this year without action in the legislature, the federal legislature. And frankly, the conversation's not started yet. So but there are a lot of people that are very concerned about that. The gas tax hasn't been raised since 1993. And the gas tax is a tax per gallon, not
a percentage.
Not a percentage tax. And so combine that with the fact that cars are much more efficient than they were in 1993, and people are driving less. There's just significantly less dollars going into the Highway Trust Fund. And so there's a lot of talk in Washington now about, are there other funding scenarios that we need to look at? Because this seems to be an outmoded way to finance the infrastructure in our country.
So let me, and I'll talk about Bloomington's situation there, but I want to talk about two things in Normal. One is you've turned to electric vehicles. Mm-hmm. You are at the forefront of that.
Mm-hmm. We have an initiative called EV Town, and we're fairly confident we have more electric vehicles on the roads of our communities than any other, more cars on the road per capita than any other community in the United States. We've invested heavily in infrastructure, charging infrastructure in our community. And it's paid off. People are buying the cars, they're using the cars. Tesla Motors took notice of it and built their first supercharging station in the Midwestern United States was done in Normal, Illinois. But then, this is part of the transportation question, funding question. Electric vehicles don't use gasoline, so they're not paying any motor fuel tax. And so this is part of the conversation that's happening in Washington too.
And Bloomington has not been at the forefront of electric vehicles and charging stations.
We have not, and that's unfortunate. I guess I understand my predecessor was not terribly interested in that. I'm certainly interested in that, but at this point, quite frankly, we have other priorities. We have sort of immediate problems. We have immediate problems, of course, in just funding our pensions and funding our budget to keep the doors open. And this is what the struggle, of course, that I have with the City Council, is they have voted for all kinds of things but don't seem to understand we have to pay the bills and our numbers have to work.
And we're going to talk about pensions and budgets in just a moment, but I want to finish with transportation because DOT, Department of Transportation, mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Has been looking very closely at your transportation center that was just opened 2 years ago?
Yes. Mm-hmm. No, about a year and a half ago,
year and
actually.
A half? Mm-hmm. And why are they looking so closely at that?
Well, it's a successful facility. This is something that they believe in will save dollars in the long term for transportation infrastructure investment, in the sense that we're bringing local bus, regional bus, shuttles to O'Hare and Midway, and a very vibrant passenger rail system under one roof. Not only saves dollars in terms of serving those modes of transportation, but it also spurs significant private development around that facility.
So are we going to see more of these public-private ventures in Normal?
I think we'll see more of that in Normal, and I think you're going to see more of it in the United States as a whole. I was in Washington meeting with transportation and infrastructure staffers, and one of the issues that Congress is looking very hard at is how does our public investment leverage private dollars and private investment? And they feel that that's very significant to solving this funding problem for transportation in our country.
Are you looking at that shared public-private venture?
Only, frankly, in our conversations with Normal, with Chris. Again, it's very difficult to get my council to, at least a majority, to be proactive on most issues of that nature right now.
So are you molding the council? And
I'm trying. Sometimes it's like herding cats.
you may be getting some phone calls after this airs.
No, I think that even the council would agree.
Well, then let's talk about the budgetary problems. And let me turn to you first. And actually, you share problems with, I mean, pension is a big problem. So how are you going to make up that? Because the state basically says these are the pensions that are going to, this is the money that you have to put into the pension fund. How are you going to come up with those kinds of funds?
Well, that's a good question. And that's what I challenged the council when I proposed having an aggressive pension policy that unanimously passed back in November. But I wanted the council to step up to the plate and say, how are we going to pay for this? What revenue stream are we going to dedicate to this, earmark for it? I proposed the public utility tax to go from 2.5% to 5%. Every other city that's comparable to us within 100 miles is at 5%. We're at 2.5%. So if we took that 2.5% increment and earmarked it for pensions, it mostly gets us the way to where we need to be, frankly, for the next generation. But the council said, no, we'll do it in the budget process, and we still haven't done it. So that's the real question. Nobody's numbers really add up at this point. None of the council members, and mostly they're just throwing out ideas. The only one with a concrete plan is Alderman Fazzini, and nobody else seems to want to go down that path. So it's just a very, very difficult, frustrating time. We are now about 20 days out before the end of our fiscal year. We're 9 months into this, and it's only on Monday that we finally got a few ideas from members of the council. And again, those numbers don't even work. People assume that there's a free lunch, and we got to get beyond that free lunch mentality.
So if you don't have utility tax increase, then what are the alternatives in your mind?
Well, the alternatives that legally are there that might cover that perhaps might be a sales tax increase of 1/4 cent or whatever that we would earmark for pensions, or maybe a 1/2 cent. And obviously, we wouldn't want to do that without consulting our neighbors to the north and Normal. The thing about the public utility tax is it doesn't put us in a competitive disadvantage with any city within 100 miles because everybody's already at that level. It's the only one that we're lower than everybody else. So if we went down the path of perhaps a 1/4 cent or whatever sales tax, that, especially if we were out front on that, might put us at a competitive disadvantage. Our tax rate, in other words, would be higher. We could also do property taxes, but the council's been generally pretty consistent. We want to hold the line on property taxes for a lot of reasons. Now, one of our other problems, though, is that we have not raised general fund revenues in 5 years. So our costs have gone up, but our revenues have been flat, and now our sales taxes are actually starting to sputter and decline. So you don't have to be a political scientist or an economist to know if your sales taxes and your other revenues are flat and your costs are increasing, you got a deficit. It's that plus the nearly $2 million extra dollars the council voted for to spend on pensions that is causing most of our real problem right now.
You mentioned holding the line on property taxes. You finally couldn't hold the line any longer.
Well, we had a policy that we developed as a council about 10, 11 years ago, which was that we were going to keep our property tax rate flat as much as we could. And we would use those dollars primarily to fund police and fire pensions. And this last year, we actually did some readjusting of revenues. We held back some projects to keep that levy flat. And this year's budget came through. We looked at opportunities for cuts and that, and we realized that, frankly, because of two reasons. One, that our interest assumptions were a little high. Our pension funds, the interest accruing in the pensions funds was not as robust as it was 5 or 6 years ago. And our EAV, property values, were declining slightly. We decided as a council that we were not going to mimic the state of Illinois and ignore our pension problem. We're in good shape on our pension problem, and we continue to be in good shape on our pension funding because we took this step to fund the pensions with a property tax increase. Now we look at that, going to look at that every year. We still have that same philosophy. We would like to see that rate flat, right around 9.5 cents, and every year we're going to try and bring it back to that number. Let's
turn to the issue of water. this is more of an issue for Bloomington than for Normal. You
Absolutely.
get your water from wells and
And the Muhammad Aquifer.
you are all lake.
This, at this point, yes. Now, there is some movement toward doing some drilling in southwest, not McLean County, southwest part of Bloomington. We can't tap into the Muhammad Aquifer directly, and neither can the town of Normal because it doesn't go underneath us. We have to make some kind of an agreement with most likely some of the western townships or western communities of McLean County in order to do that. So that's our only really long-term solution. And I think we don't want to wait for drought-like conditions to produce a crisis before we act for the future. And so I think we need to do as much as possible, quickly as possible, to move toward the Muhammad Aquifer. We're not going to drill our way into a long-term water supply solution.
The winter, most people will cringe when I say this, but the winter was very nice to you and brought the two lakes
Well,
back
it
up
was
to-
nice to us, not in terms of temperature, but in the fact that we've got lots of snow that's melted.
Yeah. So you right now, you're okay. But you do have to look long term.
Right, and then that just illustrates the broader point. Now we're okay. What about tomorrow? And that's why Bloomington has not been known for being proactive on most of its problems, and this is why I'm trying very, very hard to change a culture and to move us forward in a variety of ways, and this is definitely one of those critical issues.
But there is an effort, or I shouldn't say an effort, there is discussion about maybe a regional approach to water.
There have been some discussions in the past, and recently Terry and I have talked about this. Again, it's important to the city of Bloomington to come up with a solution. And while Normal's in very good shape on its water, we don't really see any need for looking at anything for about 25 years. Given the way our uses are. But at the same time, we're going to be cooperative with our neighboring communities, and if there's a solution that makes sense at a regional level, we're going to participate.
Let's discuss the state of Illinois. There's a House bill, it's House Bill 5485. Basically, that would put in the, if it got to this stage, it would put in the hands of an arbitrator the staffing levels of firehouses.
That's correct.
I assume that you would be opposed to this.
We are very much opposed to this. This has been a lot of troubles that have happened in municipalities over the year because of bills like this that come out of the legislature. They're bills that have costs associated with them and loss of control associated with them. And the costs are thrown on us. In other words, the unfunded mandates that we're handed, increase this pension by this amount. We're not really concerned about how that gets paid for. That's your problem, local city. And this has been happening for a lot of years. And bills like this, so many communities are different. Take our two communities. Bloomington is a much older city than Normal. And so they have a much older building stock. So their staffing needs may be completely different than our staffing needs. And an arbitrator is not going to know that.
I couldn't agree more. I think that it's really critical for communities to decide themselves how fire stations should be staffed. It's up to Bloomington to decide how Bloomington's going to be staffed, or Peoria, or Normal, or Decatur. Not up to a bureaucrat in Springfield to decide how that's supposed to happen. But as Chris notes, we're at the bottom of the federalism food chain. So we have to clean up the messes of others.
You write that phrase down.
And so the federal government can dump on the states and the locals. The states can dump on the locals. At the local level, we got to make stuff happen, right? We've got to protect you. We've got to respond to 911 calls. We've got to put out fires. And we've got to clear the streets. We have to make things happen. We don't have anybody else to dump on. And so it's also a case that, at least at the local level, when you pay for services for government, you pretty much know what you're going to get. We don't have slush funds or grant programs to send to other governments. Here, we get the money, and we put in mostly to police, fire, public works, at some degree parks. So you kind of get, I think, a better value for your dollar at the local level.
You mentioned older stock in terms of buildings, et cetera, and let's talk about downtown Bloomington and uptown Normal. You several years ago made a conscious effort to say we're going to get rid of some of the old stock and we're going to use, and then keep some of it and then redesign what became known as Uptown. But you had a hole.
We did, and we still do.
But I think it's going to be filled, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It's been a long struggle to get that project done. As you know, that project in 4 or 5 years ago was about ready to go, and the economy collapsed, and funding got very tight and stayed very tight. It's very hard to do commercial development in communities our size to get the dollars from the private banking systems to finance these projects. We've been very patient, and we've got a developer now who is going to build a Hyatt Place hotel in the first phase, and that will be directly across the street from the Marriott Hotel that exists now. And then in a second phase, we'll build some higher-end apartments with ground floor retail.
And for downtown Bloomington, what efforts are underway to try to change the face, if I may use the term?
Absolutely. That's one of my highest priorities, if not my highest priority, because I think if in the 21st century, our economy and those of similar cities like us are not going to be expanded by building more strip malls, we need to reinvest in our cultural historic core, our downtown. And so that's certainly my highest priority. Now, one of the things that I was able to do, and I have some greater control over, is to very aggressively enforce the liquor laws. And we've had problems with our bar scene, especially on Thursday, Friday, Saturday nights. Well, I've tried to take the proverbial sledgehammer to the teeth to people who've been violating the laws. And so we've had record fines in downtown. Typically fines are $600, $1,200. Well, we had a $14,000 fine. That clearly sent a message. We've also expanded, or are expanding, the number of cameras from 5 to 20 for crime detection and prevention in downtown. The council has at least generally approved power washing downtown on Thursday, Friday, Saturday nights, so making it clean, and by raising liquor license fees for those who sell liquor in downtown. So those are some of the things we've done. We've rewritten the liquor laws, and the council has worked with me on this. We had liquor code that was a mess. For example, we had a restaurant that, or somebody who claimed to be a restaurant because they had $186,000 of video poker receipts. So we've cleaned up the laws. We're really making an aggressive attempt there. But we are also trying to get state money to get a Route 66 visitor center in the first floor of the McLean County History Museum, and that could be a huge anchor for downtown. I'm in constant discussions with people about possibly investing in building a hotel across from the Coliseum, or perhaps where the Pantograph building is, and that would help us reduce the red ink in the Coliseum and create certainly jobs and be another possible anchor. We're working south of the library to work with the library, not to build an east side branch, but to build a children's library south of the library, and basically bulldoze most everything there down toward the bike trail, bring the bike trail in to connect to the children's library, to the downtown, etc. On May 2nd, the downtown will be connected to the bike trail, Constitution Trail, in 2 ways, and to Illinois Wesleyan's campus. So we want to move forward by making our downtown safe, clean, walkable, and I think we're making some progress there. But obviously we've got lots of challenges as we move forward.
And housing stock, the new urbanism, so to speak, in both uptown and downtown.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're finding there are 2 groups in the population, the millennials and what you'd call the empty nesters or retired people, that are looking for urban lifestyle amenities. They want to live in a place that's close to transit, that has services outside their door, so they don't have to travel for that. The older people want a place that they can lock their door and go away for 6 weeks, and they don't have to worry about snow on the sidewalks and mowing the lawns. So yeah, this is a housing style that's becoming more popular.
We're finding exactly the same thing in downtown Bloomington. In fact, there are waiting lists for downtown loft apartments right now. And as we had mentioned earlier, there's a new development that's going to go into effect in about 4 to 5 weeks, and it's almost all rented right now. And I took a tour of that last week. It's just a very, very impressive, facility. So people want to come downtown. Again, it's millennials and empty nesters, all the things that my colleague Chris has said we're seeing in downtown Bloomington. And that will also help with our long-term costs. We're not going to have to sprawl to the east spend millions and millions and millions of dollars on infrastructure and sewers and whatever. So I think we're going to have a much better quality of life. It'll certainly contribute to lower pollution and sustainability. I'm really confident that that's the direction we're taking. And that's one of the reasons why I think we may not, for example, have to worry about something like an East Side Highway.
And Terry brings up a good point on that.
Very briefly.
Yes. Cities across the country are figuring this out. Keep your footprint static, reinvest in your core, rehab, renovate, redevelop, because you already have police cars there, you already got the water and sewer infrastructure. It's a lot more affordable.
So we'll have to invite you back in another, well, sooner than a year, but to see how that's taking place. Thank you to Chris Koos, the mayor of Normal, in his third term there. We appreciate your insight into
Glad
the
to be
future.
here.
And also celebrating his first year in office and his 20th year as a professor at Illinois Wesleyan. Is
That's
that right?
correct.
Terry Renner, thank you both for being with us.
Thank you.
Next week on At Issue, we'll take a look at money and politics. How important is money when it comes to being elected? We'll have the pros and cons right here at this table in 1 week. Please join us then.